All right, welcome back. It is another exciting episode of Just Stories with BT. Once again, we're in the middle of our 8-part series called Recycle Dreams, where we are talking to CEOs who either utilize giving back as part of their business or they are the business that people are giving back to, which is the case today. So I'm really excited to announce that I've got Roger, who's here to talk about the Magowitz Foundation and all things giving back. So welcome.
Thank you, Brett. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. So the way I kick these episodes off is a little different than a lot of podcasts because podcasters generally ask the guests, well, tell the audience about you, and all this stuff. And the problem is that some guests don't know how to rein themselves in. So they go off on these hour-long tangents and then the whole episode's gone. So to save yourself from you, in case that could have been you, Roger, I'm going to introduce you for you. And then you tell me what I missed. Sound good?
Okay.
All right.
Like a plan.
Okay, so here we go. All right, Roger was born in Montecito, New York, but he moved to Brooklyn when he was 2 years old. As he was growing up, he actually nannied for a little while, 3 boys on Fire Island, where he learned an important lesson in life, which was not everyone lived in a little apartment. Some people had a lot of money, including multiple houses. As he grew up, he was on the wrestling team. Throughout high school, he realized after he graduated, he didn't want to go to school. He actually went right into the USMC. After doing that for a couple of years, he ended up leaving that to go get into furniture leasing in Washington, D.C. And he also started selling mattresses part-time on the holidays, realized, oh, wait a minute, I can actually do this thing called sales. And so went to mattress discounters at the time and elevated himself, got promoted, got into a district manager role, and ended up buying stores from them to run which was in 1983. In 1985, he met Jean. I'll have to ask you about that. His wife, and they had 2 kids, 1 son and 1 daughter. In 1993 was a big year. He opened up a bunch of stores in Atlanta, but unfortunately in 1996 actually went bankrupt, lost those stores, but didn't let that get him down, came back swinging and went and opened up a chain of successful stores in Arizona. But unfortunately in 2001, tragedy struck, which was his mom passed away of pancreatic cancer, which launched Roger into research and figuring out what is going on with this disease. And he launched and became the CEO of the Magowitz Foundation to fight pancreatic cancer in 2002. He went on later to sell all of his stores to Mattress Firm so he could focus full-time on the foundation, which has now raised over $12 million for pancreatic cancer research. How'd I do?
Well, what you missed is it would be Monticello, New York. And from Monticello at 2 years old, moved to Brooklyn and spent the next 15 years in Brooklyn until he, as you said, enlisted in the Marine Corps. And at 18, went right off to the Marine Corps after graduating high school.
And so, did I get your wife's name? How do you pronounce her name?
Jeannie.
Nice. And you have 2 kids. What are their names?
Craig and Melissa.
Awesome. And so right now, if you're just listening to the podcast and you're not watching on video, you'll notice that Roger seems to be very relaxed and has a beautiful setting behind him, which is because he's in Hawaii. So we're all extremely jealous. And you said your family's there with you too?
Melissa, her husband Josh, and my 2 grandkids, Emma and Blake. Actually, they're living with us right now until they find a house.
Nice. Hey, well, no better place to be. You probably appreciate this, but I'm somebody that in my line of work legitimately traveled, on an airplane, went on trips probably 3 to 4 times a month for over a decade, right? For work during my, last 10, 15 years. And the last flight I was on was last year in February to Hawaii. So I was having a birthday. And so my buddies, we all flew, and one of my best friends from college lives in Kauai. So we went and stayed at his house for a week. And every day it was like the news in the pandemic was getting a little more serious and a little more serious. And then it was like by the time we were flying out, they were already getting ready to kind of shut things down. It was wild. And I haven't been on a plane since, which is just mind blowing. So
a year blew by.
Back to that. What was that?
I said a year blew by.
It did. And so we're going to get into talking about your foundation and kind of what you guys are doing. But I really, before I get into that and we get into talking about how businesses can give back and how they can get involved in this type of thing, I really want the listeners to get an opportunity to get to know you a little bit, and I like to do that through
Well,
storytelling. Um, and so before we get into the serious stuff, I always like to ask, think of a time or story when you think back at your career, whether it's when you were selling mattresses, owning business, whether it was with a foundation, do you have any really funny or entertaining memories that just always come up when you think of that?
well, it might not be the perfect situation, but we were actually vacationing in Nashville
Hmm.
and we ordered room service. We had come in late and I ordered room service. And the room service guy looks at me and says, "Do you know who I am?" Not a clue. He said, "I used to work for you at Mattress Discounters in Virginia Beach." I'm
Oh,
like,
no
"You
way.
did?" He said, "Well, I wasn't there that long," but he said, "I justifiably got fired." He said, "I was caught sleeping in the adjustable bed after I was just working for you guys for 2 weeks." And obviously, it wasn't that hysterical a story, but it was like, what a small world. And I'm vacationing in Nashville.
Yeah.
Room service comes, and the guy looks at me, and I really had no clue who he was just
Oh
because he
my
hadn't been
gosh.
there that long. But he knew who I was. And he's like, "Do you know me?" I said, "No." And he said, "Well," he said, "it actually helped me." He says, "Because I got fired and I had to do something at that point, or my parents were going to kill me." And I think he said he wound up going to school and in back to school in Nashville, and was in school, was working at a fine hotel. And he said because of that, his life had actually gotten back on track. But
Uh,
it's a small world where you never know who's who or who you're going to bump into. And if I
no.
would have ran him over with a car, I certainly wouldn't have known even
Yeah.
who he was.
Oh man. So the question is obviously what everyone's thinking is, did you eat the food? Did you think he was going to mess with it?
That was a question, but when he told me his life had gotten on track because
Yeah.
he had gotten fired, I said, "Okay, honey, I think we could eat the meal," because he actually seemed to be in a pretty good mood and was actually looking like we had helped him along
Yes.
his life's lessons.
Oh
So I
man.
said, we could eat the meal, and we never got sick, and it was just ironic that you meet people in funny places.
Yeah. Well, I would say that, the only thing in that story that seems a little harsh is that, you know, laying an adjustable base, especially when you got the massage going and your feet are up. I mean, I can understand how someone could fall asleep. I mean, it's the most comfortable position to be in is on a base.
Yeah, he fell to the same problem that many other salespeople did, and wound up in the same place, which was being fired, because it was not uncommon to have that story happen. In fact,
Yep.
there sort of was another story where a good friend of mine worked for us, and this was in Atlanta, and he called and said the porter came to him one day and said, "Hey, what hours do you take your nap?" And my friend, who was the new store manager, said, "What do you mean? What hours do I take my nap?" And he said, "Well, the old store manager would nap between 3 and 5 in the back, and I would go in the front and work the store." And the guy was like, "Well, I don't think that's right, and I don't take naps, so you don't have to worry about covering
Oh
for
my
me
word.
while the guy goes in the back and takes a nap." So unfortunately, I think a lot of people fell to
Yeah.
the humming of an adjustable base and
That's
said to
so funny
themselves,
though.
why
The
did I
guy,
do that?
so the guy legitimately had a nap break worked into his schedule. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's
yep,
incredible.
he did. And
Oh,
had the porter train that you work the front and you answer the phones and I take my nap. I said, life is good.
yeah. As I used to have a boss back in the day when I was at Sleep Train a long time ago, and he was famous for saying, "That's a good way to get promoted to customer."
Well, he did, that happens very quick and very easy. And I bet you could do a podcast just about stories of who was on an adjustable base and what happened to him and why.
Yep. I actually, like, one story comes to mind that I'll just tell real quick, which was I was running a store. This is, 15 years ago by myself, or 16 years ago. And it was a real small volume store. You always work by yourself. One person worked the whole shift, 11 hours. And, there was never anyone in there, but I had a couple sets of guests coming in at the end of the night, of course, after not seeing anyone all day. And then I'm trying to deal with them. And this one lady had been trying a bunch of beds, and she'd been laying on beds for like an hour, which is a pretty long time for someone to be like laying on bed. She really was like, I really want to get the feel of it. And we used to have these things called education centers. And they were like these, and this is back with Sleep Train. So Dale had these, trains on them and all this stuff. And they were kind of right in the middle of the store. And they had the inner springs around them. So you could kind of show the guests. Well, where I was sitting on my desk and where this education center was, the lady who was trying these beds, when I was talking to another guest, I thought she left. And I could have sworn I heard the door chime, and I thought she left. So apparently she didn't leave. She goes behind where I can't see her, and she's laying on this bed. So she falls asleep. I don't know. No idea she's there. So I like finish up with the other customers. They leave out the back. I'm wrapping everything up. I go around and I hit the alarm. And then when you hit the alarm, you got to like run through the store from the front all the way to the back to get out before the 30 seconds. And it's like beeping. And right when I get to the back of the store, I hear this like, hello, hello. And I like panic, I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? Like, what was it? And I see this lady sitting up, and I'm like, oh no. So I sprint back to the front to get the alarm before it starts, blaring. And she was so funny. She was so embarrassed. She's like, oh my God, I don't even know what I'm doing. She's like, I totally fell asleep. It was a classic.
Well, you
So,
see, maybe you want to use that story.
hey, this is how it
And
works.
look,
So,
there's a million of these little anecdotal stories. Like my brother-in-law worked for me, and we had like a small truck. Well, he normally didn't drive the truck, but he drove the truck and was heading to the bank. He forgot he was in a truck and went through the drive-through at the bank
oh no.
with the truck, and of course, like took out the bank because it was a drive-through, and he was in the truck. And I'm like, John, what were you thinking? And he was like, I wasn't. I'm so embarrassed. The police come. You know,
Oh my God.
it's a whole. Obviously, the truck is destroyed. The bank is destroyed. The police are there, and of course, he's mortified that
Yeah.
he just forgot he wasn't in, because it wasn't a big U-Haul truck.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was like a small box truck, just completely forgot.
All right. So that was the easy part, right? Easy questions. But I love to hear from people who, especially CEOs and people who have, run their own companies. I love to ask about a story or two about failure, right? Like, what was something in your life that you think back when you look at your businesses or the foundation that you was a really difficult time, and how did you get through it?
Well, I would probably say the best thing that ever happened to us was our bankruptcy in Atlanta. And I've heard it from other people, but I think until you've been through a bankruptcy and you sort of been walking up the mountain and now you're coming down the mountain, and it's not a very good feeling.
Yeah.
And so you reflect, and even if all your reasons for why you had to go bankrupt were right and justify, it teaches you a lesson that I had never thought about, how a bankruptcy could be the best medicine, because that's a lesson you don't want to learn again.
Yeah.
And it completely changes your mindset of how you think about business, how you think about your personal financial affairs. And it wasn't a good place. And my only thought at the time was, I got myself into this, and there's only one person who can get myself out of this, and that's myself. And I still believe that to be true for me or any other entrepreneur, that you just really had to dig deep and take that lesson to say, okay, you don't want to be here again. And what do I have to do to make sure that I don't get here again? Because this is not a comfortable place, especially after you've had some success in career in your life, it's a hard lesson. And the interesting part was all I knew was mattresses because I was young. I mean, when we opened up stores, I was 22, 23 years old. And truthfully, it probably all worked because I was too stupid to know what I was doing was wrong.
Yeah.
Because I really didn't know what I was doing. I was 22, 23,
Yeah.
just saying I could do it. And so when the bankruptcy hit, it really makes you dig deep as far as working out of the bankruptcy. And what I told myself was, if I go to all my major vendors and say, look, I'm going to pay you all the money that I owe you, but it'll probably take 2 to 5 years for me to pay it back. So would you rather go into a bankruptcy and get 10, 15 cents on a dollar? Or do you want to work with me and I will pay you back? Might be 2 years, might be 5 years. Obviously, a lot just depends. And really, just about everybody rolled with me.
That's
But
awesome.
what wound up happening is at the end of it, I was a lot stronger in the respects from all of those companies because I certainly could have just done the bankruptcy and, hurt whoever my vendors were at the time. But I knew I wanted to stay in the business and I wanted to treat people fairly and I wanted to be treated fairly. And so, in all honesty, the best thing that ever happened to me was the bankruptcy because you're never going to go there again.
Yeah.
You're never going to let that happen again. And you learn from your mistakes, and those become one of those life's lessons that you take it to heed and say, boy, that was tough, but that was probably the best thing that could have happened to us. And really, it stayed with me and how we dealt with things forever because we
Yeah.
were a relatively small company. And so it wasn't bank financing, it was Bank of Roger financing.
Yeah.
But that was just whatever money we had earned,
Mhm.
through the business. So it was a tough navigation, but I think we came out a lot better and a lot stronger and a lot wiser. And when I look back at my life, I say the bankruptcy was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that before, and I think that it seems to be something that as I've been doing these interviews with different CEOs, they pretty much all have these major setbacks, and the thing that seems to define them versus a lot of other people is that instead of letting something like that fold them, they end up doubling down. Like, okay, well, it's happened to me once, not gonna let that happen again. Let me learn from it, and then and then gonna go to this next thing. And so, how did you tell yourself? I mean, just mentally, like you go through something like that, you've got a lot of industry experience. I'm sure you could have easily gone out and got a job with Simmons or Serta, I mean, in these companies, but how did you tell yourself like, no, you know what? I think I'm just going to stick with entrepreneur and go do it again.
Well, but I just knew in the back of my head, the only one who got me into this was me. The only one who's going to get me out of this is me. And I'm going to have a much bigger value in myself, in my own mind, if I can navigate and work through at the time a horrific situation. Because look, it's certainly not pretty when you're going into a bankruptcy and you don't have money, and then the attorney says, "Well, we need $150,000 retainer," and you're like, "What? What? You know, I'm going bankrupt. Where do you think I got
Yeah.
$50,000?" He's like, "Well, if you want to retain me, you come up with it." So, look, you have to become creative, and I think the biggest thing was you had to have the confidence in yourself.
Mhm.
You had to know that this is the way we have to fly, and life is reputation.
Yeah.
And if your reputation is that you're a blowout artist, I mean, who really wants to deal with you?
Yeah.
you know
Definitely.
Only the desperate ones. And my feeling was, look, I respected all these people. I was in the wrong place at the right time, and it just wasn't working. And we also had to realize that it's not easy to wake up one day and say, I think we've had enough. You know, we're bleeding, and uh, how do we get out of this?
Yeah. No, I get it. So tell me, so you've got these stores, the chain's going well in Arizona. And then just kind of walk us through, the events of 2001. How does Stina Magowitz Foundation get started? Just that whole kind of transition period.
Well, seeing the Magowitz Foundation got started like everything else. It just sort of happened. Certainly, it wasn't a plan to lose your mom. Uh, Certainly, when it happens, at least in my case, you go into a depression. I mean, my parents were divorced when I was 2. Mom was dad, mom, and everything to me.
Mhm.
So when you sort of feel like you've lost your whole world, and she was young, she was only 64 when we lost her. That's pretty young considering I'm 61 sitting in front of you.
Yeah.
So 64 doesn't seem to be that old. And so really what happened was he going through a depression for a year, and then sort of just like the bankruptcy said, I just have to do something. And in my head, I couldn't figure out why she wasn't here anymore. What did she do something? You know, why did the guy upstairs decide to take her? And so in my mind, what I rationalized was if I had to lose my mother, who was my world, then I had to make something big out of it. That I had to take that problem and say, well, what I'm going to do is help other people because of the loss of her. And really that's what we did. If I had to have a way to justify her loss, and the way I justified her loss was saying, okay, I lost my mom, but it's empowered me to help hundreds, maybe thousands of people in their life and in their battle with pancreatic cancer.
Mhm.
And that was sort of how we got into it. Of I had to come up with a reason why I lost my mother. And then, like being an entrepreneur, you just sort of jump into it. And the first year, I look up on the internet, there's a woman doing a golf tournament. Hey, I'd like to join you. Okay. Well, she raised $10,000 that year. Well, I had never done one, so I really didn't know if that was a lot or little. It
Yeah.
seemed like a lot. And so I told her, I said, hey, how about next year you put the event in my mom's name, and let me see if I can't call a bunch of friends and see what they would do. Well, so she said, okay. And she puts it in my mother's name. And that year we did 50,000. And that was really our first year as Sina Magowitz Foundation, even though it wasn't a foundation at that point.
Yeah.
And that was really how we started. And then the year after we did that, the woman told me, hey, each year we're going to change the name. I said, huh? I said, well, why would all of my people come to somebody that they don't know? And she said, well, that's how we're going to do it. We're going to be fair. And I said, well, I tell you what, rather than us arguing, how about you do your deal and I'll just take a shot to do a golf tournament on my own without your help, which was nothing,
Yeah.
and do it by myself. And really that's what we did. And that was the start. And really just had a bunch of friends and family who were more than happy to help and step out, and just met a bunch of great people and patients and doctors, and it just all started moving into the right direction. And most importantly, it made me feel good, because in my mind I was justifying the loss of my mother to empower me to help others, and that gave me a lot of relief. I mean, it was
Yeah.
like, oh, it was like a big sigh of relief that I can help other people. And we can. I mean, we do it daily.
What was, can you think of one story in particular with maybe a company that sponsors the event or comes and donates or whatever that, you know, you saw them donate, or you saw them being touched by what was happening, and you thought to yourself, like, oh, I can't, wow, like, I can't believe how big this has gotten, or like, I can't believe how much people are donating.
Well, when you do it without really being on the philanthropic side of stuff, all of a sudden we're having $1 million events and really moving the needle and really making a difference, and really then seeing patients who went on those trials that you and all your friends sponsored, and they come up to you and say, "Thank you for my life. I'm alive because of that trial, and I've gotten to see grandkids, and we've had wedding anniversaries, and we've had birthdays, and without that, I'm not sure I would be here today. So thank you." That becomes pretty powerful. And the truth is, we almost do that kind of stuff daily, Brett.
Yeah.
And so it's a powerful moment when those kind of things happen, and they happen fairly frequently. And of course, that's what gives you the drive,
Yeah.
because certainly fundraising during a pandemic, not easy. We had to completely switch from to a virtual world. So like any charity, you had to change the way you were doing business, and really it made me probably double down my time on the foundation,
Yeah.
because now we were in a whole new world. Now we weren't in person, touching the flesh, meeting people, or for that matter, I couldn't talk to you and say, "Hey, I'd love to involve avocado in a program. And how about I fly in? And how about I meet with you? And how about I bring a patient? And how about I come with one of our doctors? And we explain the whole program that we're doing, Brett, because we really are making a difference in this world and would like you and avocado to be part." The Zoom call only goes so far. You lose that interpersonal relationship. That's where we make all of these relationships, at these events. It's no different than going to a betting conference or a leadership conference or a furniture market. It's all called networking. Well,
Yeah.
the same practice that follows business follows charitable giving.
Yeah.
It's those same steps.
Yeah, for sure. I imagine it's been crazy, but I also think that, I've seen a shift in my mind, especially, on social media and with people I interact with, and especially the younger demographic, millennials, now 30, 35. What I'm seeing is I'm seeing people with a huge need and a want to work with companies, to work with individuals, to work with products who have this kind of story of giving back. I think that, it's becoming we're at a crossroads where I think that companies who just don't even do any philanthropic work, I think people are gonna be like, I don't even want to really do business with you, because there's so many different things you can do. Obviously people can work with you, but there's foster kids, there's this, there's so much need in the world. And so, like, what have you seen just over the last few years? Have you seen a shift in more people wanting to get involved in this type of thing?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind, if a customer shopped, say, 3 stores, and one of those 3 stores had a charitable arm to what they did, and it was real. It clearly wasn't, baloney that somebody
Yeah.
made up and said, "Ah, we give, 2% of all our gross sales to whatever the charity is." And we would see it firsthand, even in Virginia Beach at Mattress Discounters. We would take take a book about Randy Pausch that was really the first sort of face and voice of pancreatic cancer,
Hmm.
and we would put his book up on the counter. Well, what would happen was, now people, they're getting ready to leave, and you're talking to them, trying to close them. You're going to give them an estimate of what the price would be. And the guy said, "Well, what's the book?" Well, we said, "That's the last lecture. And we're involved. We have a foundation for pancreatic cancer." And I was just watching the salesman do this. And he goes through the whole presentation of why we have the book, who Randy Pausch is, talking about pancreatic cancer. And and this guy was a real asshole. I mean, he was not a pleasant customer. He was just one of those guys that he was going to bust shoes all the way. And all of a sudden, at the end, now we're talking about a charity. He, in 2 seconds, said, "You know what? I appreciate what you guys are doing. Just write it up." And that was sort of the tipping point in my head of that was that aha moment of, I knew it. People are charitable at heart. People want to give. And look, if I'm going to buy a bed for $2,000, and one guy is telling me they're heavily involved in a charity, and all across our store we would have posters and material. Well, why wouldn't a person want to help the people that are helping their community
Yeah.
versus somebody that's just taking all the rewards and putting it in their pocket? And,
Yeah.
look, when you think about cancer, who hasn't been hit with, it might not be pancreatic cancer, but I guarantee you there's few to no people. If you had 1,000 people in a room and said, "Hey, raise your hand if a family member or friend has had any form of cancer,"
Yeah.
I mean, 999 hands are probably going to go up.
Yeah.
So even though people might not have been pancreatic cancer, that they know the pitfalls and the tragedy of a family member getting cancer and what they have to go through. And look, people are certainly appreciative, especially when it affects their community.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah. And what do you see, so in having a foundation like this, that's obviously it is specific to one area, and you've got these amazing doctors and these unbelievable stories. How do companies get involved with you? Are they just straight donating? Are they doing, percentage of the funds? Like, how does it work?
Well, it's really been across the board. Some people it will be cash. Some people it will be, hey, not only are we going to give corporately, but I'm so committed, I want to give personally as well. And I'll give one classic example is Leggett and Platt, Carl Glassman. Carl, CEO, president of Leggett, is very involved in what we do. He's been involved almost probably since day one, and he's been involved for a reason because he believes in it. He believes in me. He believes in the doctors, and he's never had pancreatic cancer in his family, but he sees the differences that we're able to make in people in funding clinical trials and in making a difference in the community and the world. And I once asked Carl, I said, "Carl, are you okay with me putting it out that Leggett is doing this and you're going to do stuff personally?" Because certainly he's doing a great deed. I don't want to hurt him. And if I'm Leggett and Platt, I got a million people calling me for money.
Yeah.
And I don't think Leggett gives that money out too easily. And Carl said to me, Roger, if somebody could show me the program that you have, and someone could show me the quality of Dr. Von Hoff, who heads up the program for us, he said, I'll do the same thing. He said, so I'm not worried about you doing it, because look, if you publicizing it helps the cause, then I'm all in.
Yeah.
And so we've done programs early on with Mattress Firm where we did the round up your dollars. And all we did is a round up your dollars, and not even every store was doing it. I think we raised 380,000
Jeez.
like in 4 months. And as you know, there were some stores killing it, and other stores never got a nickel. But the people that were doing it did it really well. And a lot of what happens is by me manufacturing it, where I called Brett and said, hey, Brett, who did avocado, who are they charitable with? Why are they charitable? Is there a cause? Is there a charitable cause near and dear to somebody's, a CEO's heart? So really it's me knowing having the connection
Yeah.
and going out there and saying, "Hey, Brett, is there anything you think you could do? Or can you come to our event?" And really, that's what happened with Steve Stagner and Steve Fendrick very, very early on, because I didn't know it, but when they were buying my business, one of the things they were looking at is they did not have a charitable cause
Oh,
at
wow.
that time. And I can remember Steve and Steve flying to Arizona to meet with the doctors to speak to them. And Steve got that aha moment. Both of them did.
Yeah.
And they said, "We like this." Well, I didn't know what they were doing because when Mattress Firm bought me, they weren't even public at that point.
Wow.
And so, but they had that aha moment that, okay, we could use this, people could buy into it. We love what you're doing. And really what we do is we raise money for clinical trials. And clinical trials are important because the standard of care really doesn't work and really doesn't prolong life.
Yeah.
So most of the time, if somebody's diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, unless they're on a clinical trial, and maybe they're real lucky, that they don't have a long time.
Yeah. No, I know the numbers are staggering. Um, so, to kind of like to close the book on this, one last thing I want to ask you about is a theory, not a theory, but a practice that I call experiential giving. And so, what I'm a firm believer in is that the best possible way of giving that any organization can do is experiential. And what I mean by that is that a guest, comes in to your store, online, whatever it is, and they make a purchase, right? And this purchase then, equates to some type of giving. So let's say it's with you guys, right? Let's say we say, hey, you come in, you're going to buy this bed, we're going to donate to the Magowitz Foundation, right? And so what happens is that the employee, right, who's showing this bed or showing this spa or whatever you're selling, right? They do a great job. They make the sale. They feel good about what they're doing, but they also did such a good job that it was this item that has this attachment to Magowitz, right? Then the consumer who came in, they were going to come buy a whatever anyways, right? They're going to get their spa. Like they came in, I'm going to buy this thing today. It's going to happen. But then they were presented with this thing. Hey, if you buy this, also, just so you know, we're donating this to this charity. And then what you didn't know is this guest's mother or dad or spouse had cancer or maybe died, or, so something triggers. And now they're like, oh, I can buy this thing and I can help someone. Right. And then obviously the money on the back end that actually goes to you guys at Magowitz, right? Then we're able to pay the doctors and able to do all these things for these more clinical research, and we get closer to curing cancer, and so it's this circle, right? And everybody wins. And what I'm starting to find out over the course of this last 5 years of doing this, both at my jobs and talking to people, is that this experiential giving, it drives just as much or more revenue and guests than putting things on sale. And so I'm becoming a believer in, like, man, you've got to start rotating in giving campaigns into your normal ad promotional calendar, because it drives in just as many people. And yet, instead of taking all the money off products that you would normally discount, you can put that towards your giving event. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. And you got to remember, the salespeople have, their job is not so easy. But when you have a charitable arm and they feel good about it, even if they were trying to figure out who are they going to work for, I need a job. It's the same way if we took those same three customers. Well, if I need a job and somebody explained to me that we feel not only are we selling mattresses and making people sleep better and have a healthier life, but we're also giving back to the community. We're going to take X% or give X dollars towards pancreatic cancer. Well, first of all, some of those people have cancer in their family. Maybe somebody has pancreatic cancer. Well, now that salesperson is all charged up, right? Because now he feels so good about his company. It goes back to, all you need is that one person to thank that salesperson, saying, you know what, thank you. Not only was it a great experience in your store and you gave me a great deal, but I greatly appreciate what you do, because a lot of times it was the buy-in. And we would have, like 96% where all of us our store people would donate to the foundation. So everybody became part of it. I mean, it wasn't
Yeah.
just the customers, it was the salesmen, it was the office staff. And so everybody got bought into this. And then when we would have that one big event a year, it was sort of like a Mattress Firm leadership conference. I mean, we bring everybody together. We have the great meals. We have outside activities. We have donors mixing with patients, and patients mixing with doctors, and doctors mixing with the nurses, and and the patients get to see the doctors in a totally different atmosphere versus going to the clinic and having to worry of, am I going to get a surgery today? Am I going to get bad news today? And they get to meet the spouse. It's a totally different feeling. And the
Yeah.
bottom line is everybody does win. And it's awesome. And I believe when you go through that full circle, everybody is the winner, Brett. And if somebody is sitting out there not doing anything
Yeah.
for the community, and it's really for themselves. I mean, people certainly take pride in this. I take pride in this. Anybody that's part of any charitable giving program, they certainly feel good. And like I said, you have that one patient come up to you and say, Brett, thank you for what you do. It saved my life. Or maybe their kids come up to you and say, if it wasn't for what your company is doing, mom would have been dead a long time ago. Well, it certainly puts a lot of pop in your step, and you want to do more. And that's how people become creative.
Yeah.
And look, that's how you get vendors, because when
Yeah.
the vendors see the good that you're doing, look, they might have said, hey, I could give you $1,000 this year. But if they really see something positive happening, I guarantee without me saying anything, like next year we'll do 5,000.
Yeah.
And they themselves would move up the ladder each year.
So can you leave us with, is there any one story that sticks out in your mind of a survivor that went through one of the trials and just kind of always gets you, that you think about?
Well, what gets me is I spoke to, we had a friend and a patient, Phil Zablisky, and Phil was in hospice. And we were talking, and literally he passed days after we spoke. But he was so thankful that he was able to live about 3.5 years from the time of his diagnosis, and that he was part of clinical trials. He himself donated pretty heavily to the foundation, but was like, I have no regrets. I have no regrets, and I want people to know what I'm doing, because I want more people to do this. And it's very interesting when you're speaking to people days before they're dying.
Yeah.
I can't even think, I can't even put my mind wrap around what are they really thinking. And here's somebody telling me he was just so happy he was part of the foundation, that he was part of the process, and that he had a lot of birthdays and anniversaries. Wish he had a whole bunch more. But the clinical trials, when we look at pancreatic cancer, is really what's greatly needed to make a difference in this world. So I guess, to close, when you could speak to people who are in hospice and they're thankful and they're happy, and it amazes me, because what would we all think? Well, you'd have to be boo-hooing. Well, I'm sure
Yeah.
they're boo-hooing as well, but to see people with their heads so high, it gives you a special feeling. I mean, you just know you're doing the right thing, and you're not helping people. When you think about one, I look at it as, when you look at one bad action in this world, how many people it affects.
Yeah.
It's like if a drunk driver hits somebody, well, they didn't just affect the person that they hit. There was children, there was mothers, there was fathers, there was aunts, there was uncles, there was workplaces. Well, I think the same thing we could spin to be positive. If we all go out there and try to do something positive for our companies, for our communities, wouldn't the world just be a better place?
Yeah. And think
It would
about,
be.
and you think about the ripple. It's the same ripple when you do a good action. It affects
That's what
their kids. It affects their thing. It just keeps rolling, you know?
and really that's what I love about doing this. I love when somebody just calls me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I've been involved, but I want to be more involved." Or what unfortunately happens is they were sort of on the peripheral edges of being involved, and then they get pancreatic cancer in their family.
Yeah.
Then it really changes, and of course, then they really want to dig deep and what could I do and how could I help? And I tell people help is A to Z. Help
Yeah.
could be, to one person, $25 is a lot. Another person has a gift card that they could repurpose. Another person could write you a check for $100,000, Brett, and
Yeah.
doesn't change anything they do or their own foundation. And look, when I even look at my life and my career, I've told people no one is going to remember me for how many mattresses I sold. No one's going to remember Brett for that. No one's going to remember Mark or Mark. But one thing they will remember Roger about is what he did for pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
And I really believe that, because it's not going to be on my tombstone. Look at how many mattresses he sold and how many stores he had. I think all of that really, at the end of the day, is irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's, what did we do to help community? What did we do to help our family? What did we do to personally take a stand and try to make a difference? If by making a difference, were we able to engage other people and mobilize corporate America, mobilize, look, you never know who you're talking to. I mean, I could be sitting on a plane sharing a business card with somebody, and I'll go home and Google them and say, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
I got to give this guy, I got to give this guy a call."
Yeah.
And what's happened, we've been fortunate, and people have been very, very loyal to what we do, but they're loyal because up until COVID hit, we didn't have one paid employee, Brad. We have no brick and mortar. We had no paid employees. It was just three of us working, no pay, no nothing. And so every dollar somebody gave us and gives us really goes to the bottom line of the cause. And that meant a lot to people because,
Yeah.
we weren't having to, we had no overhead. So you weren't having to worry like, okay, for every dollar, how much is really hitting the bottom line? Well, if I have no overhead, yeah, maybe we have an event, we had to pay for the event.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what all of our lives are about is, what did you do in your life to make a difference? And again, it's not going to be what company you work for, how many mattresses. It's really going to be how did you help the guy next door? And look, when I connect people, I put my cell phone all over the internet. So I get people call me that I have no clue who they are,
Yeah.
but I guarantee you I could help them. I could make their life a lot easier, and I could put them into world-renowned doctors by just placing a phone call, Brett. That becomes very powerful. I could save
No,
somebody's life
absolutely.
by just knowing who to call.
Yeah. I mean, you could save someone's life by just someone listening to this podcast and having somewhere to go, and that's
Well,
really, that's the perfect way to end it. Cause I know we've already been at an hour and
yeah,
but I think that the reality is this, as I've listened to you, a couple things really jumped out at me, and I think that, you being super transparent and talking about your mom and, going into that year of, depression after, I think is really important because I think there's so many people right now who are going through loss and that there's this natural kind of depression that comes from it and trying to figure out how do you fill that void. And as a society, I think we're really good at just dumping things to fill it, like let's fill it with media, with social media, with TV, with this, like whatever I can to quiet the noise because I don't want to just deal with the pain, because people don't want to. And I think that something that you did and that I hear from other people is that void never goes away. It doesn't just disappear, but you can fill it with good. You can. And that when you fill it by doing things for others, you know, that's one thing that it's never going to bring your mom back, but it sure is going to make your mom proud wherever she is, you know, and it's going to help someone else. And I think that, you know, if we can just keep encouraging more and more businesses, get out and do something. I don't care what it is. I'd love it if they go work with you, with anyone, foster kids, military, like it doesn't matter. There's so many different things. You know, I always tell people I did this documentary film and about the genocide going on in Burma when I was in my 20s with my brother-in-law and one of my other best friends. And we were in Washington, D.C., raising money and doing all this stuff to get over there to shoot this film. And people used to always tell me, why do you care about people halfway on the other side of the world? We got enough problems here. And I'd always answer them with the exact same thing. I'd say, oh, I know, absolutely. Tell me about what organization you're dealing with here. Tell me about what you're doing. Never once did I ever have someone be able to come right back and tell me what they're doing. You know, and so like what I always tell people is like, just get out there and do things for others because it's gonna make you feel better about your situation, no matter what that situation is.
Well, and I think people, when you dig deep into, why are we here on this earth? What are we doing? Where are we going? What are we going to be remembered for? What will our family remember us for? And we've certainly touched probably thousands of people, and a lot of them, I don't know who they are. They just call, but that's the beauty of it. I love doing that. When somebody calls me that I don't even know, and somehow they found us off of the internet, I'm treating them the same way because, of course, what my hope is if I help them, when you can, you'll help the foundation, and you do wind up making a difference. And what are you waking up in the morning for? It's not just to work. I think it's a lot of, you got to give back, got to make a difference.
You do.
And
you
I
do.
thank you for having us and hearing our
Thank you so
story
much for
about the
coming
Cena
on.
Magowitz Foundation.
I know this was awesome. So I had a blast. I learned a ton. You're really motivating, and I appreciate it. So we will end there, Roger. This is phenomenal. So look forward to seeing you and hopefully making it out to the tournament. We can all be back in person hopefully next year.